last week. Let the record indicate that all board members are present, as is Haiti Robinson, Superintendent, Tanya Baker, Clerk, and our attorney, Scott Mullins. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have an agenda in front of us. Is there any changes or additions to the agenda?
Dr. Lyle, we'd also like to remind the board that this is a special called emergency meeting to discuss the budget, and we are merging both agendas tonight to talk first about the litigation and the new school project, and then we'll discuss the budget information that we have to share with the board. So as we're approving the agenda, Dr. Lyle, if the board will please keep that in mind.
So the agenda has both objectives on it. Is there, excuse me, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 We now have an agenda for tonight. Number 2, update on litigation and new elementary school project.
I'm going to ask Scott Mullins to update the board on the litigation and also the new school, elementary school project. Mr. Mullins?
Thank you, Dr. Lyle, members of the board. Basically have good news tonight. The last time we met on May 4th, we adopted a resolution that essentially told us to go back and work out some issues. There were 2 primary issues. One was the wetlands mitigation that we felt needed to come out of the construction projects as opposed to our operational budget, and I think that was simply an oversight on the Board of Supervisors' part. We sort of were like 2 ships passing in the night, and so that never really was a matter of debate. It was a matter of it was not in there before, and we needed to make sure that it was in before we signed it. And the other issue was the $600,000, and as you may recall, that relates to 202 credits that were initially applied to our project here at Ridgeview, and those credits were taken out by a 3-2 vote back in 2019, which effectively reduced our budget by $600,000. They were taken out to be applied to the Haysai project, and very pleased to hear that the Haysai project is fully funded. I think it has $52 million, but it has substantial money, and they're not required to make the 5% match. And so basically what we're asking the Board of Supervisors to do is to restore that to our budget, because I think we all agree. I think our construction managers have told us for years now that this is a skinny budget, and I think that we're optimistic anyway that the Board of Supervisors will see that that money is really going to be needed to build the elementary school, to move forward. And so that's something that they haven't voted on. I understand they meet next week, and hopefully we'll have a document to them so that they can look it over. Hopefully if they have questions, they can call Ms. Robinson, myself. We're going to talk about this under the closed session topics of their negotiations with the Board of Supervisors, but I think that there's good news that that you members, the 5 of you, are meeting with them, and sometimes talking with them, meeting with them. And that's the way our system's supposed to work. People are supposed to talk to each other. There's nothing bad. To the contrary, people need to be talking with each other to work through these things. So, we'll go over it some in closed session, then come back out and talk about it and adopt it. But basically, the only thing that we would be talking about is not a new resolution or anything like that. Is basically the agreement that we would send back to them as what we hope would be a final draft. And our lead counsel, Mr. Massey, has been working with their lead counsel, Mr. Sexton, and they're working through the language. And I think that we've got this thing down to almost such a fine edge that there's not too much more to grind off. And so we're getting there. I know when we started this, I think there's a sense of perspective that we have to keep, that this has been the biggest thing on your agenda, and we've kept it front and center on your agenda. And the Board of Supervisors came in on this, a majority of them, on the backside of it. There was a large learning curve for them, and they've had other things that have been going on. Their job description is bigger than running a school system. So it would never be done quick enough to suit us, but it's being done, and I think that we should just be thankful for that and all sort of roll up our shirt sleeves and work toward the finish line. So we'll talk about it more in closed session, but for now, that's basically an overview of what's happened since we met last.
If there are no questions for Mr. Mullins, then, Mr. Chair, if I could go to item 2, please. I'm sorry, item 3, discussion of the potential funding loss to the F21 budget. I'm going to ask Mr. Barton in just a few moments to come and just summarize where we are. But on Monday, May 11th, Mr. Barton, Dr. Lyle, Mr. Rick Mullins, Mrs. Phyllis Mullins, and I presented the FY21 budget to the Board of Supervisors at a budget meeting. I'd like to say that Mr. Barton did an excellent job in presenting the budget, in presenting the facts, and discussing the issues. The members of the Board of Supervisors asked good questions, participated in the discussion, and shared their concerns. It was a grueling 4 hours for what in prior years has been approximately 90 minutes to 2 hours. We explained to the Board of Supervisors that we were already dealing with a $398,000 budget cut from the state, and that we were not increasing our appropriations requests to them from 6.5, but would make those budget cuts from the proposed budget on March the 25th. Our thanks to Dr. Lyle, Phyllis Mullins for their comments. They did an excellent job. To the Board of Supervisors, and to Rick Mullins for asking questions. On Monday, May the 11th at approximately 5:30, we received an email from the county administrator that the proposed local appropriations was $5.9 million, or 140% of the RLM, or $600,000 less than the requested appropriations. With the state budget cut of $398,000 and the $600,000 cut, the total budget deficit is $998,000. Let me state here that there was discussion to allow the school board to carry over any funds into the budget next year. We are still not certain of what that amount is. I think the estimated amount that we prepared for the Board of Supervisors was something like $150,000. But again, many things can happen between now and June the 30th, and so that is not money that is guaranteed that we will have then. These cuts are devastating. And they're devastating on so many levels. First, when the Board of Supervisors appropriated the $7 million last year to the school division, all the salary scales were revised, and for the first time in 10 years, our employees received a step increase. Second, with the continued financial support of the Board of Supervisors, because the Board of Supervisors have always given us more than what the state has requested, our students in our school division has accomplished the following. All schools last year met or exceeded the state's accreditation. Dixon County schools rank 24th in SOL test out of 133 school divisions. In state rankings, our students rank 22nd in reading, 8th in writing, 2nd in grade 5 math, 2nd in world history. The Ridgeview High School's SOL combined rate in English is 95%. In math, it's 91%. And Ridgeview Middle School has reduced their chronic absenteeism last year by 13.86%, and their SOL combined rate in math for last year was 90%. The high school graduation is 95.17. The dropout rate is 3.42%, and all of our seniors graduate with either an advanced, standard, or applied diploma or industry certification. All Dixon County school students receive breakfast and lunch at no cost, and Ridgeview High School and the Dixon County Public Schools offers a thriving career and technical education on the Ridgeview campus for both high school students and middle school students. The Dixon County Public Schools has made significant strides in becoming one of the top school divisions in Virginia. We are sitting in a beautiful educational facility, the Ridgeview campus, which is debt-free to the Dixon County. The school division has been an excellent investment for the Board of Supervisors. With the accomplishment of our students, our staff, and what is going on, the Board of Supervisors and the Dixon County taxpayers has received an outstanding return on their investment. Since March 2013, with the COVID-19 school closure, our instructional staff has prepared over 5,700 learning modules. They are teaching in numerous Google Classrooms with their students. They are participating in Google Meets with their students. They're making weekly contact with students and their families, and they have remote office hours each day to help provide assistance to students and families. Beginning in May, all of our teachers are taking training to implement virtual instructional environment, since it is improbable that we will begin school in August in a traditional manner. Since March the 13th, our cooks have prepared and our bus drivers have delivered 99,801 meals to our students and our families. We have placed internet access points in each of our schools and tried to continue the instruction and learning for our children while staying connected with our children whose lives were so significantly disrupted. The work for our staff has never stopped, nor has it decreased. We are working and serving our children in ways that we thought were unimaginable before March the 13th. We understand that the Board of Supervisors are experiencing challenging times. We are also, as a school division, face challenging times as well. This is a small community, and we all struggle together. But the bottom line is that we must work together, because none of us have the luxury of not working together nor communicating with each other. And none of us want hard-working, tax-paying people in Dixon County to lose their jobs. It is devastating during the COVID-19 crisis, 2 weeks before school ends, and approximately 1 month before the June 15th deadline, to inform staff members on contracts of potential reduction in staff, to be informed that the school division is facing nearly a $1 million budget deficit. Mr. Barton, if you'll come to the front, please, and share with us the budget.
Robinson, members of the board, thank you for the time tonight to come out and share some information with you. As Ms. Robinson shared, she and I had went through the budget in detail with the Board of Supervisors. It was the same budget that we'd reviewed that you guys had approved at the March 25th meeting. And of course, since that budget was passed, there have been some changes. As she mentioned earlier, the $398,305 cut from the state. With that, some things that we've already started looking at, of course, the original state budget had a 2% increase for all SOQ and instructional positions in both fiscal year 21 and in fiscal year 22. The new budget that they have only has a 2% over the biennium, which can be given over the 2 years. So, as Ms. Robinson mentioned earlier, the salary committee worked very hard last year to get salary scales established, steps established, and a step for our staff figures up this year to 1.06%. So I've removed the additional 1% that we had to put in the budget originally to get to 2% to meet the state mandate. It's one thing we can do for starters and leave the step, and that saves about $155,000 of the $398,000 cut. From that, there's been some other minor things that have happened, some possible retirements, some changes here and there, so we've been trying to update those. We're looking at everything that we can, everything that we can look at, but we really need your feedback. We need your help as far as what areas that you would like us to look at. Any thoughts or ideas you'd like us to present to you, to figure numbers on, to come back with, because this isn't a task that I can do by myself or Ms. Robinson I can do. We need the board input and the board's help in working through this. As she said before, almost a $1 million cut. Of course, we can carry over any additional funds. We shared with the Board of Supervisors Monday $151,000 at this point, due to the COVID-19 closure, and that was basically looking at savings on bus fuel, substitutes, part-time staff, substitute bus drivers, those type things, because all of our full-time staff still under contract with us, and even a lot of the part-time staff we're having to pay emergency paid sick leave, emergency family medical leave to those that have filed for that. On top of that, I'll mention right now, our unemployment, I track that as we get the notices from VEC. We're up to about $38,000 there right now. We won't be paying that this year. It'll be paid, our first billing will come in July with the new budget. Then we'll have a billing in October that'll be split out based on as VEC pays benefits to these folks. So that's something we have to go back and add into our budget.
And Mr. Barton, would you again explain that as a school division that we have to pay for all of
We do, and with the VEC, it's a little different sometimes than with private employers. Some of you that might, be involved in business, Mr. Mullins, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Most private employers, whenever you do your payroll, there's a tax, a VEC portion that you have to pay, the employer pays. And it's based on your experience as far as how many claims you've had against you. And, if you've not had claims for several years, you'll be down at the minimum amount. And once VEC files claims, and, they'll kind of raise your rate some, and you pay every time. With the school division as a governmental employer, and as us, we normally don't lay people off. We don't have a lot of turnover in staff. So our unemployment benefits that we pay is very, very minimal. So it's cheaper for the division to pay the actual benefits than it is as a private employer would do to pay the tax that it would be. This is kind of an unprecedented time through the COVID-19 closure. And once before, when I was first here back in 2016, we had a budget cut then of about $800,000 from the locality, and we had 42 full and part-time positions that were cut. We had some unemployment expense at that time, but since then it's been very, very minimal that we have. But that's kind of how it works and why it's different, why I'm talking about the VEC that we have to pay. So, good point. Looking over our budget, we're right at 84% is salaries and benefits for our employees. In our budget, there's $4.3 million or 16.05% remaining in our budget that is not salaries and benefits. We're taking a hard look at everything, going back and looking at every line item in the budget for anything that we can come up with. So I guess if you have any questions, Ms. Robinson explained most about the meeting and most about the budget numbers. So.
I need to ask, how much money did you say we would have to have to make it even with last year's, what we asked for in the beginning, I guess 6.5.
6.5 is what we asked for. This past year, they gave us $7 million, but we had a really good state budget. The state had a really good budget, and so we were able to ask for, $500,000 less from the locality. And, unfortunately, the state, through the COVID-19, had a shortfall of almost $400,000 for us, so that really caught us off guard.
So it would take $600,000 more or less to bring it up to where we wouldn't have to have dismiss employees or things like that.
Well, really we've got, basically, $1 million. If you take, 150,000, if we can have that carryover at the end, that'd be about 850,000. And if we take the additional 1% off, that brings us down to 700,000 right now, is about where we're at this point. So, and again, we could have more carryover at the end, or we could have less. We're still working through that number as we get
Well, you've got a month to go. I understand that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It would just be my suggestion that we all, I know that people in good faith are out here still talking and working, and I would just hope that everybody would be respectful and understand that we've got 5 good citizens on the other side, and let's talk to them in a very respectful manner. And I know there are people trying to find a way to help us, and I hope they're successful. I don't want to see anyone lose employment and their benefits. In this time, where do you go to get a job? Where do you go for help? You take the food off your table, the clothes off your back, the roof off, the roof over your head. This is a difficult time. We've never seen anything like this, and I would just pray that all of those folks work together in a respectful manner to restore at least an even field for all of our people. And I hope that the same thing is for our students and all of our families. Something would happen to keep everybody at least secure in this awful time that we're in.
I agree.
And Mr. Resnick, we understand the county's position. We understand the challenges that they're facing, because we're facing those challenges. What we're going to suggest is that next year, let's begin the communication in January and February. If they're looking at significant budget cuts, we've always had meetings in February and March. And of course, the Board of Supervisors explained because of the COVID-19 that they've not been able to meet. And we certainly, we know that. Look at the way we're meeting now and how we met, in February. We understand that, and they're making also those things. But 5.9 is the lowest appropriation that we have received from the locality in 10 years plus. So we did not, while we tried and fought for the 6.5, I think the 5.9 is, that is, I think, what was kind of for us devastating, knowing, again, what we've been doing since March the 13th,
Well,
and how hard our staff has worked.
I simply believe this. You've got people on the Board of Supervisors, they're folks that are trying to find a way to remedy this. And I hear, we don't know this, and the Board of Supervisors can't make their budget on a promise, but I understand the federal government is looking at maybe doing some things. So there's hope, but that timeline for them won't be our timeline, and you can't make a budget in thin air. Obviously, you have to have the numbers in place and the promises in place, and I firmly believe that there's a way through this, that we don't get hurt. If everybody stays reasonable and takes a look at everything they have, and maybe out there, if that happens before the end of May, if that can happen on the federal side, we've still got hope out there. And
Well, there's always hope. But sitting on this side, I think that I need to share with the board that on June the 15th, we have to legally inform staff members who are on contract. And Mr. Mullen,
on that? I'm sorry, I
I'm
couldn't-
sorry.
What's the time on that?
June the 15th,
By June 15th.
right. If we have anyone on contract and we are not certain that we can hire them back, then legally we have to inform them of that by letter before June the 15th. So that's something that perhaps the Board of Supervisors do not need to or have to face. It is something we have to face. What I like to propose to the board is that tonight you provide ideas, options for us to look at as possible cuts, and that we come back next Wednesday, give Mr. Barton a week, give myself a week to look at all the options that you have suggested and see what the savings are going to be. I think a week from will be the 20th of May. And so we're going to propose a special call meeting on May the 20th, again at 5 o'clock, and to begin looking at the options and recommendations that you have, putting a cost savings to them, and let's see how we can get to 800,000 or the million or whatever the numbers are that we need to get to.
Larry, what, I know
Yes.
you might have said it, but what is it 800,000 that we're looking at falling short as an estimate right now? Or
As it is right now, that's going to be, about 700,000. About 700 where we're at right now.
And that's with what you said would be the 1% step
Taking
raise?
the 1% away. That's leaving the step in there. Everyone still gets their step, but it's not anything additional. And that'll satisfy us if we do a step this year and do a step next year. That'll get us to the 2% that the state has in there as a requirement to qualify for the state funding.
So without the step this year, that would be what, Larry?
If you take the step out and assume that we have about $151,000 in carryover, that brings us down to about 700,000. So,
What, would you repeat that about the 2%? I missed that.
yes, on the 2%, in the budget for the state right now, we have to give a 2% increase over the biennium over 2 years. And so our steps figure out to about 1% a year. So if we give a step this year and a step next year, that'll get us to the 2% for the state, and it'll still keep our salary scales moving.
Okay, thank you.
Last year, the Board of Supervisors and a committee of staff members, quite a large committee, worked on the salary scales, and we finally got steps on the salary scales, and we were up to date. Being able to give a step this year on the salary scale, I think would be a tremendous blow to our staff.
I do too. I would like to see this board, just from my perspective, look at what we actually can. It's a small figure and it won't get us far, but the board look at itself first and see what board member cuts that we can make. I would like for us to be able to discuss that, and then always prioritize non-human personnel cuts that are out there. I know that's your focus already, and I hope that we don't have to. I strongly feel that we have to keep the step raise in there and look at other things besides that. That's just my perspective.
Thank you. We'll definitely take a look at that. So,
Mr. Barton, I would have a question. Maybe you don't know this. Doesn't every state and locality in the country probably have, what's the two biggest items in their budgets, in your opinion?
as far as like within the staff,
Within the county, what would be, within a county, for example, what would be their,
the single biggest line item in most cases, of course, it's going to be staff, payroll, but the biggest line item is going to be, your health insurance as far as a single line item for us.
for a county, what would be their largest item?
I'm sorry, for a county as far as expenditures?
As far as funding, yes. Schools would be the first, right?
Yes, schools would be the first.
Is that the same in every county in Virginia, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it probably is, but I
And the
don't know that
second,
to be a fact.
what would you think the second largest item would be in the state budget, the county budget?
I'm afraid I wouldn't know.
Probably trash and transportation and what have you, landfills, et cetera. I would guess. I mean, that's several $1 million as well for the localities. They're in a hard spot.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there's room this year to maybe level this out, and I hope you all can continue talking some way to make that happen. I'm like Mr. Hackney. I hate to see the cuts go into the human side of this equation. I know 84% is what we've been told is the human side of the equation. Let's just make sure we all do everything we can to keep things as even as possible.
Mr. Resnick, we will continue doing that. I think Ms. Mullins did an excellent job of sharing that, and Ms. Mullins is here, and certainly I'm not saying that because she is here, but she spoke as president of the Dixon County Education Association, and she was a strong proponent of, our staff, what happened in 2016, and we did try to provide, and will continue to provide, as you have asked us to do, the human side, the cuts in programs. Any cut that is made to a school division, the first ones that feel it the most are the people on the front line, and that's our teachers, our children, and the services we provide for them.
Well, what you said in the beginning regarding the move, I don't think I haven't really looked at this to be exact, but the grandparents and the parents and the students and all the other caregivers in this county have to understand the significance of what the superintendent stated a moment ago. Dickinson County schools, our students, have moved from the bottom quartile to the top quartile. One reason they're there is because of excellent support from our Board of Supervisors and our local citizens. That support needs to remain, if at all possible, to keep that going. People all over this state are discussing Dickinson County. Some even came here to visit, to see and look, and it's a high honor to be in that position, and it's a move that most counties will not see in their time. The folks here in Dixon County need to be very proud of everything that's been done, and frankly, our students are to be highly commended and teachers and staff, and again, the families for where we are, and I certainly am proud of that fact.
Well, I'd agree with you, Mr. Resnick. I think, we've all heard it before. It takes a village, and the Board of Supervisors is certainly an important part of that village as well. Historically, they have done Dixon County schools pretty good. And, I know everybody, it's almost in every household. Right now, revenues are down and expenditures are up.
Yes.
I think there's some room somewhere that we can work this out with having the least amount of pain that we can possibly face through this. And so I'm hopeful in that.
Thank you.
Larry, do you have the numbers on if we, I know that we kind of had a last few years looking every year buying, was it 3 new buses or 2?
2. We do 2 new buses each year, and that's about $190,000 is what that runs into.
So that's been figured into the $700,000.
Yeah, they're still in the budget as far as buying those 2 buses.
So without that, that's $190,000 savings, you would say.
Well, in a sense it might, but we have, I know 2 of the buses that are slated for replacement next year. We've had a lot of repair issues with them. One of them's actually broke down right now.
May have more maintenance repair costs.
It's over at Freedom Ford right now, and it's been there for about 6 months. But every time we get them 2, it's the small handicap buses. It's a $5,000 or $6,000 bill every time. Every year we're putting a lot of money into them too, and I know that's the 2. It's a toss-up. You'll still get a savings, but over time, if we don't replace them, we've spent a lot of money over the past 5 years on those in particular. So. But it's still, we got to look at everything. We got to consider everything. So
yeah, I was thinking that just in terms of my cup may be half full on this, but everything that happened with COVID-19, a lot of the things that were suffering the shortfall in budget, local, state, and national, it is self-imposed, a lot of the problems that we're facing. So hopefully we could return to at least some more normalcy as far as the budget would. If we get through 1 year, and I hope it don't run into a longer 2 or 3 year deficit. But that was my thinking. If we were made short-term cuts and hopefully get back to normal next year, looking at those items that just we could save on this year and be able to get back to normal next year is the hope.
That's a good point. That's something to consider. And then at the same time, though, from the way I understand, as far as what Mr. Moore and the county has shared with us, this is going to be kind of the new norm. It's not going to be, you're funded $6 million, you're funded $6.5 million. It's going to be 140% of RLM is basically what we'll be looking at.
They've given that figure.
Yes,
Yeah, he
they
said he
have.
was instructed to prepare the budget on 140% of RLM, and that's going to be, what did he say, not a 1 year hiccup? It's
No,
going to be
it's-
kind of the new norm, something like that. So I think we can anticipate moving forward, and it's my understanding, they said a lot of other local counties are funding the same way. They've talked to other localities.
Okay.
But no, we need to look at everything. That's just what.
Do they use the same measuring stick for everything in every county, or just because the other counties picked a number?
That's a good question. I don't know.
It should be kind of equal measurement, I would think. I mean, comparable.
Because the RLM is the required local match from the state.
Right.
What that is for, there's a RLE, which is going to be the required local effort, which is the bare minimum that they would have to give. And then there's a required local match. The required local match would include, like we do VPI, Virginia Preschool Initiative. We offer preschool, and the state funds so many slots in that. So in order to do that, then there's another local match with that. And we participate in K-3 class size reduction. There's a local match with that. We do the at-risk, which is another local match. And lastly, we participate in the state technology grants. We get $180,000 from the state, and the local match is $26,000. So all them together, that becomes the RLM, the required local match.
So the
based on the
RLM is a higher number than the RLA.
It's a higher number than the RLE, and so they're saying 140%, which they're just required to give 100%, but they're saying 140% of RLM, the required local match. And so therefore that would, if our enrollment drops next year, then that would mean that, be direct correlation, the county funding would drop at the same time. And I know we're just 1 year at a time, just looking at this year. This is a crisis right now this year on what to do, but in the back of our minds, we have to think, if this is the new norm, then.
Yeah.
As the board is thinking of other issues and other ways that you would like for us to look at the budget, we have a committee of approximately 30 plus staff members from each of our schools. And the task of this committee is, number one, is to have a calendar prepared for May as a recommendation to the board. It's going to look very different, perhaps than other school calendars. But I think the task of this committee, the bigger task of this committee, is what will next year look like? And I think we all are beginning to understand that next year is going to look very, very different. I know in the back of our minds we're all hoping that the new normal will go away, the old normal will come, but from discussions with Dr. Lane, State Superintendent, that's not going to happen anytime soon. It is improbable that we will begin school traditionally. It may be improbable for us to begin school virtually. We may be looking at a beginning of school in October or November. We may be looking at beginning school, monitoring our numbers, and then we have to close for a month. That is going to be our new normal. We're looking at that if we get to begin traditionally, children may come to school every third day. And the problem is that nobody knows what that looks like. But all of that and the logistics of that is going to require a great committee of people, which we have, and it's also going to require the funding for that.
And I might add, the CARES Act funding, which we've, mentioned before, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about, Dixon County Schools is getting $700,000 in federal funding through the CARES Act, and that's not money that we can just supplant our budget with to say, hey, we got a hole here, let's fill it with this. The biggest need and biggest use of the funds for us is going to be in the technology sector to provide devices to our students if we have to do this virtual start in August or whenever it might be, to have one-on-one devices and have what we need, for the teachers, for the students. That qualifies for it. There's certain things that qualify and certain things that don't. Like the $38,000 in unemployment I mentioned before, we can't file for reimbursement under the CARES Act with that. This is a reimbursable-based program. As we spend the money on an allowable item, then we can seek reimbursement for it. We can pay, the emergency paid sick leave and emergency family medical leave because they say it keeps a person employed. We can use it for that. We can use it for, student devices, for things like that. But that'll help us some with doing this. It'll help us with additional cost of the food delivery and food preparation. We can do that with it because, with school starting back with our budget we're looking at, depending on this calendar, we could even have additional costs if we have to do, longer than a 180-day term, which is kind of looking that way. If we have to go 190 days, our teachers are under contract for 200 days, so we're covered there. But your cooks and your bus drivers, your part-time aides, your substitutes, we're going to have added expense there. Hopefully, we can work through all that. But there's just so many variables right now, so many moving pieces. We're just trying to narrow all that down and try to fill this gap right now that we have. So,
And one more issue with that, 40% of our county does not have internet access or access to broadband, more like the dial-up. So one of the things that we are looking at in a very serious way is how do we provide that? Do we take a bus and put internet access on the bus and the students can come on the bus and we park the bus somewhere? Now we've added internet access to all of our schools, and so our students can come and they can park in the parking lot and get internet if they don't have it, but they have to have transportation. So not only are we having to look at the device issue, but we're also having to think outside the box and talk with people and say, how can we do this? How can we provide the internet service that our children, if we have to start virtual next year? And all of that will also require funding. So it's a difficult. But getting back, just to get ideas again from the board as to where the board would like, what areas the board would like for us to begin, we would certainly appreciate any feedback from the board.
I don't see how we can continue the step increases that was approved last year, but then on the other hand, I don't see how we cannot continue it.
I know, sir.
So there's some dollar amount there.
I know. Took us 10 years to get them there. So, and Dr. Lyle, you were on that committee, and so you know how hard everyone worked and how diligent everyone was.
And it's such a shame that we had one good year, so to speak,
I know.
and then the bottom fell out.
We need to hear what Dr. Lyle is saying. He's not speaking in his microphone. Now, he never speaks without speaking wisdom, so we need to hear him.
You need to. All right, now say that again, Dr. Lyle.
What's part of it?
About the 1% of the salary step.
Oh,
You may need to speak closer to it, sir.
well, how about this? I think I said, I don't see how we can continue to do it, but I don't see how we cannot continue to do it. And then I said, we had one good year with the step increase, and then the bottom fell out. No fault of our own.
That's our very first faculty meeting that I was in, coming in as a new teacher, and very first faculty meeting, principal stood up and said, you know, you're going to be asked to do more for less for a while. And I wish I was smart enough to believe him that it was going to be such a long while.
Yes.
And, you know, there's been these kind of storms and things in the past, whether it was the recession that happened a few years ago. I mean, we're in a tough spot, and we'll have to just leave no stone unturned to try and look and see where we can save some. I mean, I think everybody sitting up here wants to protect our people, and I think that's what I'm going to go in, and I'm sure that's what these guys are going to go in as well, to try to protect our people as much as we can. Being on the other end, and I could be wrong in this, but being through a school system with cuts, I've heard folks say many a times that they would much rather give up a 1% or a 2% so that they could keep other people within the school system working. And I know that's based on personal opinion, but I've heard several people say that. I don't know that would be the most popular opinion of our folks, but sometimes I think when it came down to that, to do best what's for all, that most folks would kind of look at that. So while I agree it's a shame to do it and a shame not to do it. You know, it's just it's a position that nobody wants to be in.
Well, I know the school board is in a very difficult decision, and you're going to have difficult recommendations placed before you and difficult votes to add. I would like to ask Mr. Chair if there could be a motion to have a special call meeting next Wednesday, May the 20th at 5. I think Mr. Barton has gotten some ideas where the board is leaning as far as allowing Mr. Barton to crunch numbers to see where the cuts can be. We were concerned, it's all a matter of perspective. When we heard that we were getting $398,000, we were just concerned about how we were going to cut $398,000 from our state budget. And now that just doesn't seem to be as, while we aren't there, and we still have a long way to go, it just, I guess it all goes together, so.
Well, I may be one of the less informed persons around this table regarding what students need, but it's been my experience over a few years. The human part of this budget is critical to our students.
Yes.
Been on par and above par with most of the state, and whatever can be done to keep that human component in place for our children, for our students. I would ask Mr. Barton and the superintendent to look at every possible way to maintain the level of service that these kids need to maintain the highest standing that this county has ever achieved in the history of this county. I don't want to see that diminished. I don't want to see those children diminished in any way. I ask you to do everything you can to keep that in place for our children.
I second Mr. Rasnick's thoughts on that. I couldn't agree more. I think that, if the RLM figure is 140% above that is a long-term outlook, I think it's realistic to assume that there will be over time, that we have to look at reduction in human resources, but I'm hopeful, very hopeful, that can be done over time and through attrition and through things like retirement and that type of, and I know that, you know, we don't always have the luxury to look at the long term. As you said, we're going year by year. But if attrition is the way that we get to that, you know, it just makes a lot more sense to me, just based on also what Mr. Rasnick was saying about keeping our high standards and our level of achievement. That's due to the staff we have.
I agree, and we have the same sentiment. We want to do anything we can to not touch the staff, the people. You know, we don't want to hurt the students as far as programs that impact the students, and we will try everything we can. You know, any ideas, and I've been working on a lot of stuff the past 2 days, a lot of ideas, running a lot of numbers, so I'll have some stuff next week to look at. But kind of to put things in perspective, at the same time, we've got a $1 million cut, and non-payroll expenditures is $4.3 million of our budget, out of our total budget. So
I understand how hard this is, and I just know that everybody out there, every parent, every person in this county has to have immense pride in what these people have accomplished, what these students have accomplished. And I just simply think that with that discussion out there and those 5 people over on the Board of Supervisors working, they'll find a way to close this gap at this time. We have never faced a time like this in the history of this county. This is different. On normal times of mine closing back in 1995, I guess, when McClure 1 closed up there, it took $1 million straight out of the county budget. They didn't have time to react to anything. They had to do what, and they had to do what they had to do all the years. Things like that happen. They've always happened. They will continue to happen. But this year is different. This time is different. Our people have never been in the strain. You're talking about putting people on the buses. How can you put the students on the buses if you have 6 feet? You can't get many on there with 6 feet separation. Most parents would hesitate, I think, to put them on the bus, given what's out there right now. But you know, we just have to do the best we can. I know that everybody will think of the best practice to do, but it's so hard right now. But we need to do what we can, not to fail, not to falter from the lofty perch that our kids have placed, that they're in, with all the pride they have with what they've done.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Barton? Any other comments? Dr. Lyle, we just need a motion for the meeting next Wednesday.
Sorry.
Special call meeting next Wednesday at 5 o'clock to discuss potential budget cuts.
Okay. Is there a motion to have a special call meeting next week, May the 20th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
And if it's not too much trouble, if we're having a special call meeting next week, I think the Board of Supervisors, do they meet the day before?
Yes, sir, they do.
So perhaps we could add to that agenda, in addition to a special call meeting to deal with the budget issues, to also deal with the litigation. So if there are any changes that come about in the discussions with the Board of Supervisors, we could immediately take that up the next day and finalize.
That's for the next special meeting. You want that included?
Yes,
I
could
would
we
make
do that, Ms. Robbins?
And do we need to modify the motion?
Yes, if we could just modify that motion to have a special call meeting. What date was it, the 24th?
No, sir, it was the 20th.
The 20th, to deal with 2 issues, the litigation and the budget issues. That would give us flexibility if the Board of Supervisors had any changes or comments, so we could keep that at the front of our discussions.
So,
Mr. Chairman, if it's in order, I'll adjust that motion to what Mr. Mullins has indicated would be best.
So you amend the motion. Is there a second?
How do we do that to make it right?
I think it's, at this point in time, the motion has been passed, but I think that at this point in time, we can take up an amendment of the motion. I think, from what I see.
The amendment of the motion would be to, on May the 20th, to bring the litigation discussion, make it possible for us to have that discussion on May the 20th along with the other business.
Okay.
Does that satisfy the requirement?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second to that now?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any board comment on item 2 and 3 of the agenda in front of us? Or I should say, any more comment or question? If not, that takes us down to item 4, closed session. We don't have any public comment.
No, we did.
Pursuant to Section 2.2-3711, Paragraph A of the Code of Virginia, I move the board convene a closed session to consult with legal counsel and receive briefings by staff members pertaining to actual litigation with the Board of Supervisors and IDA regarding the location of the proposed new elementary school pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're now in closed session.